Welcome to NCSS Here for You. For over 50 years, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to quality psychosocial services to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously, and we strive to provide the highest quality services. According to Eric Erickson, a noted developmental psychologist, every person must pass through a series of 8 interrelated stages over the entire life cycle. NCSS provides a continuum of services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance. NCSS's purpose is creating a stronger community, one person at a time. Now, let's get to today's show. I'm Joe Halko, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Each month on this program, we discuss a human services topic, and we do that with staff from one of our 3 direct services divisions. Our 3 service divisions are Behavioral Health Services, Children, Youth, and Family Services, and Developmental Services. And, on occasion, we have guests from organizations that NCSS collaborates with throughout the year. This month's episode is titled Intensive Family-Based Services at NCSS. The Intensive Family-Based Services team supports families working towards developing safety and stability in order to maintain a child within the home or reunify with a child. The team also works to support parents and families caring for children with high mental health needs. Overall, the team focuses on 3 areas: intensive family-based services, parent education, and home-based behavioral intervention for children on the autism spectrum. To discuss the Intensive Family-Based Services program at NCSS in greater detail, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guests. And they are Becky Phillips, Intensive Family-Based Support Team Leader, Kathy Sandville, Family Support Worker, Ben Houchin, Family Support Worker, and Corin Mertz, also a Family Support Worker. I want to welcome all of you to the program this month.
Thank you for having us.
Now let's start with how do you get referrals and assign clients to yield the best outcomes?
So the referrals that we receive are initiated by a wide range of people. Families themselves often call to request services. We often, as an agency, get a lot of calls from schools, primary care physicians, DCF. Those are some of the predominant referral sources. And so generally, anyone who's hoping to make a referral doesn't call my team directly. They call the NCSS agency, and they're directed to the family assessment team. And then in a process more complex than I'm describing, the family assessment team goes out and does an intake in which they gather information about all the family's needs, and then they make appropriate referrals. And then when we're receiving referrals, that's because the concerns are primarily in the home, and primarily there are often multiple children, and they can be concerns from safety and basic needs to understanding a complex diagnoses to behavior management and establishing routines. And we like to think of the client as the family system. We have an identified client who's the child, but we really think of the whole family as, you could think of it as kind of a mobile, that all the pieces are connected, and in order for one piece to move, all pieces have to shift. So we really kind of think of it as connectivity issues, where there are things about the system that need to be tweaked and adjusted. So we're really there to support the whole family. So those are usually the referrals that we receive. And then as far as assigning the clients, then it's kind of a combination of who has the best treatment modality background for the specific needs of the clients, and then also who is availability, because generally everyone keeps a full staff caseload, and they're often seeing families on a weekly basis, if not twice a week. So who has availability, and then also the clinical acuity level is how we kind of assign the next client, is who's accessing crisis or having a lot of safety concerns, and so we triage based on the needs.
Now, what are some examples of different diagnoses that you use to help families to navigate the system and the kinds of goals that you develop?
So we work with a lot of different diagnoses. They can really take on a very wide range in terms of what the children are presenting with. So some of those diagnoses could be PTSD, and probably the most prevalent one would be ADHD. But it's not uncommon to work with kids with depression or anxiety. And in that world of kind of all of those, there's a lot of different goals that you can kind of that you can develop with the families in order to address each of them, whether it's something that's specific to PTSD or something that's more ADHD. But there are a lot of general themes that a lot of families are kind of looking to do and work toward. And one of them that I think we all probably work with is just communication, and having parents be able to communicate with their children in ways that they find are more effective, ways to get their children to behave in the way that they want them to, or to just kind of have a better dialogue about a lot of different things that are kind of stressing the family out. So as Becky mentioned, it's more around like a family system and not specific to the child, what we develop our goals toward. I mean, it's definitely a balance of both. So some of them are very specific. For example, if a child has PTSD, you definitely want to work toward goals that are addressing that diagnosis. But at the same time, we look at the family as a whole. So if there's something that's very particular to not the identified child, but the brother and his relationship with the identified child, then there's that dynamic that also has some goals that are built around that. And we have a document that we use called the Individual Plan of Care, or an IPC. And when we sit down with the family to go over that, it's very much directed by them in terms of what we are going to be working towards. So there could be a goal that's specific to communication. It could be about the parents' relationship themselves. It could be about the child getting along with peers. Or it could be anything that's very specific to the diagnosis. So alleviating a lot of stressors, working on a day-to-day basis to kind of self-regulate in ways that you can work with the child to keep them physically and emotionally regulated throughout the day. So it does kind of cover a broad range of spectrums. We don't really have anything specific as far as a family or a type of diagnosis that is like our niche. It's kind of a little bit of everything.
And I think something that's kind of unique to our program is there's a subset of diagnostic codes that are for actually family system issues. So a V6120 code is a parent-child relational issue. So it's definitely not just a specific child diagnosis, but we actually look at the family. And I think the diagnosis is really helpful, as Ben said, for kind of guiding treatment, but it's more kind of a template for maybe things to look for. In terms of the nitty-gritty, like goals and daily work, as he said, it's really directed by the families, and it's really about the specific behaviors or the specific things they would like to achieve for the family, rather than a diagnosis or managing a diagnosis. The diagnosis is the label for what's going on.
Yep. And I think something that's really unique about our program is that we're really working to educate parents and to get parents to be able to understand, like, what are the things that I can help you learn to help with these symptoms or these things that are happening in your family or with your child, with the ultimate goal being that I don't want to be with your family forever. Like, many of my clients are wonderful, but I want to give them the skills to be successful families on their own.
Right.
So often it's actually understanding what the diagnosis is and what appropriate expectations for your child given this diagnosis. Sometimes it's, you have a child on the autism spectrum, your expectations for them to be able to verbally communicate how their day was may not be realistic. So sometimes it's the kind of our expectations and reality, and it's helping families to kind of bridge that gap.
And I think with what Ben had mentioned earlier that I think is important is the fact that people understand, especially parents understand, that each and every situation is individualized. So it's not as if everything is cookie cutter, and because every situation is different and certainly every individual is different. So how you're going to navigate that is going to be completely different for each individual, depending on what their needs are.
I think that's a great point too, Joe, because to me that's the strength of our program. We're not a canned program. We don't know before we meet the family what it is we're going to do. It's very much directed by them, their needs, and how we can support and help them reach the goals that we establish together. So
I like to tell families that I work with early on that I'm not Nanny 911, like the television show. Like, she kind of has a script, like step 1 you're going to do this, step 2 you're going to do this, step 3 you're going to do that. Just because every family is so different from the last. If that was my approach, then I'd be trying to make every family into what I thought that it was supposed to be.
Right.
And that's really ineffective family work. So
every culture is different.
Right.
Yeah. That's why, like, the treatment plans are technically called individual plans of care, because they're exactly that.
Because they are that. Now, how is it determined where and how often these services are provided?
So as I previously discussed, we're often getting referrals because the needs are primarily in the home. So in turn, services are, I would say, primarily in the home, but we can take on other settings. So generally, a IFBS service might look like 2 meetings a week, one with the whole family and then one with just the parents, to kind of process how that family visit went and to talk about stuff that may not be appropriate to discuss in front of the children. Often we're meeting just with parents to have just those kind of discussions because, as I said, it's really family work and parents play an integral part in how that mobile moves or not. But then also depending on what the family's goals are, because they are so individualized, sometimes, especially if they have multiple children, they may want to work towards being able to go grocery shopping or being able to take the family out to eat, other community settings that are currently really difficult to do because of their children's behaviors. So we may work towards that, towards community outings. Or it can be supporting families in accessing other community resources. So when we're doing some of that one-on-one parent visitation, we may be going out to access other resources, and we'll speak more of that, I believe, later.
Now, in addition to the services that NCSS provides, what types of community resources do you help families to access?
Well, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and so there are many other agencies within Franklin and Grand Isle County that provide services, and so when we've determined what the needs of the family are, we can direct them to things like All About Kids, the food shelves, economic services, if they're dealing with housing issues or worrying about fuel assistance, those kinds of programs. Voc Rehab has been a strong resource, Department of Labor, if people are looking for employment, jobs. There are after-school programs. So it's again defined by what the family is saying, this is what I need some help with. And there is a resource number that I use a lot and urge my families to use a lot, which is the United Way phone number, just 211 from any phone. So that is also a very helpful resource.
A lot of us have gone through the Bridges Out of Poverty training, and it's looked a lot about how you need to be able to access resources to meet basic needs and be able to have your family, at a certain level of functioning, before you're able to do some of that deeper work and some of those deeper issues. And so we really want to support families in managing those day-to-day needs so that they can then be able to not stress about those so much and look at some of the other things that are going on. So often we work with families on really empowering them to know the resources and access them. As Corinne said, the hope is that we're empowering and enabling families to do these things independently. So we may go with them to their first Voc Rehab meeting to kind of understand and navigate the system, and then the next one we're following up because they've gone on their own. And so it's kind of a process of modeling and then stepping back and having them able to access those resources.
And we put them in touch with resources outside of the agency, but we also put them in touch with other resources within our agency. So we might be making referrals from our program to adolescent services or case management or some of the other things that NCSS offers.
Outpatient counseling, I feel like that's the referral I make the most is if I'm talking about ending my work with families or just depending on how the work's going. I'm such an advocate of that for everybody. Just as a human, I think like spending that time on yourself so important. So I know that I make a lot of referrals for outpatient counseling for people. I think it's important.
And that's a good actually segue into the next question that I had, Corinne, which is, when necessary, do you also handle the service coordination, not only with outpatient therapists, but primary care physicians as well?
Absolutely. So we do so much of that. So we are specifically contracted through DCF. So a lot of us work on cases that DCF's involved in, whether there's an open case with the family or kids are in custody. So that's a piece of the treatment team we're working with. Depending on who primary care doctors are, I have some doctors that are great and want to come to treatment team meetings and really be involved. Sometimes my involvement with doctors just is, hey, my kid's sick this week. I've got to get him to the doctor. Can you help? And we'll do some of that acute stuff while at the same time problem solving. Okay, so when I'm not here, how do you get the kid to the doctors on Tuesdays at 1? Because that's going to be something in your life you're going to have to continue to do. So we do a lot of that. I go to a lot of school meetings and talk with schools about how we can make the whole team work together to help support kids. I think consistency is so important for kids. So I think it's so important that all of the people that are working with kids are understanding, so like, what are our behavioral goals for this kid, and how do we all kind of work in this way that will help move this kid in one direction. I think kids don't know what to do when there are so many different expectations and things going on if school and family and other places are so disconnected. I think kids can get very stuck.
Yeah, I think treatment coordination can really vary from, as Corinne said, the like in the moment taking you to the appointment or giving you the information to call somewhere to from like initiating a meeting. So we often are the ones initiating treatment team meetings, or when a case is very acute, we may be organizing a coordinated service plan meeting to try to pull in other resources because a family is really struggling. So it takes kind of a broad range, but we really try to work with other providers in developing that individualized plan of care so everyone is working from one common understanding of what the goals for this family are.
Now, how have other recent changes in treatment, such as electronic medical record, improved services?
So there have been a lot of shifts in the agency throughout the past few years in terms of electronic medical records, or EMR. I know they've worked really hard to kind of be in times with the technology advances and really use those to kind of better facilitate communication about cases. So currently we can like review the notes of other clinicians that are on the same case to make sure that the message that they given at their outpatient session is the same message that we're then giving when we're in the home and things like that. And now the next step that we've had is that we actually have one electronic treatment plan. Before we had our individual ones, and then other services would be able to review those and kind of add on, but it wasn't one plan. So now we're literally functioning all from the same kind of set of goals and resources. So the hope is that it will encourage more proactive communication, not because we have to coordinate on, okay, we had this one goal, how are you going to work on the home, and I am in the office, and had to come to some agreements before we get the family to sign that document. So I think it will really facilitate us all being on the same page constantly about that consistency that we'd alluded to earlier for the child and the family in terms of what we're doing for services.
Absolutely. I think I already see that a lot with the families that I work with. I have some clients that I'm working with where I might have a weekly check-in with the outpatient therapist because we are working on the same things and the same goals. So it's, what did you talk about this week? Where did you, maybe you thought you had a breakthrough here and here, so I should ask about these couple things when I see them next week. And I think that that creates better treatment for the people we're working with. The more consistent we are and the more things that everybody knows and that's out in the open, the more we can work on things.
And the other part of this that I think it's important that people understand is that when you talk about the fact that individuals who are working with a family have access to the electronic medical record, that they do understand it's only the people that are on the treatment team, and that no one else has any access to that information. I think the importance of that is that it gives you instant information once the information's been put in. However, by the same token, it doesn't mean that everybody and anybody has access to that information. It's really only those that are on your treatment team or other treatment teams that are involved with that family or that child.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the system as a whole is an NCSS only system, so no outside providers could access it at any time. And then, yeah, there are a lot, I know technology and works very hard to make sure that we're only accessing the charts that are appropriate to our services. So as you said, it is really helpful and important for a team to coordinate their services, but also that client's information is protected from those who aren't involved in their treatment.
And the only reason I bring that up is because I think in today's world that sometimes people hear acronyms like EMR and many other things, and they may feel that if anything, the privacy is being lost, and in this particular case, it actually is probably even tighter.
Yes, exactly.
Because of only certain individuals being able to get the information.
And I think another way that it's been great that we've shifted is that before that nothing is kind of in paper, and staff are all educated a lot on HIPAA and how you protect paper information, but the more we can get rid of things floating around, the better. So I think, and like you said, it's actually tightened things a lot in terms of protecting information. And some other pieces I think EMR is going to continue to be helpful is they're working towards, we have certain standardized measures, which I can discuss later if we have time, but certain standardized measures that help us kind of gauge what a family's goals should be and where they're progressing, we use the parenting stress index, and so maybe they start really high in stress and then end up lower. And currently those things are scanned into the chart, but we can't necessarily use that data, like kind of compile it and analyze it. So the hope is to move into a system in where that is kind of living data, and we can use that to inform the goals that we're creating and how we're deciding the frequency and duration of services. So I think that's an exciting development. And also that there are other ways of using an electronic version of a record to make sure that run reports to make sure all our documentation is up to date, that we've gotten the appropriate consents and releases and things, and make sure that our chart is that we're doing everything that we need to for our family. And so I think those reporting modules are really helpful too. So there's a lot of exciting developments in that realm.
If I could just tag on something that you were mentioning a second ago in terms of the confidentiality piece of things, I think another thing that's not directly linked to EMR, but I think is a great step in the right direction for NCSS as a whole, is that all of the communications that are going on through emails has also been kind of encrypted now, so that anything that goes from out NCSS to somewhere else, they have their own kind of encryption for that, and they have to log in and make sure that the people who are accessing that information are the people who are supposed to be accessing that information. So I just think that's another way that NCSS has kind of stepped up to the plate to make sure that, like you were mentioning, the only people who are supposed to be looking at things are the ones who are actually looking at it.
Yeah, that's another good point, Ben.
I think that's huge. Like, I always use clients' initials when I email clients, and I never put a full client name in an email, because you just never know. And like, it's about, like, I am privileged to have the information that I have about the families that I work with, and I feel very fortunate that families let me into their lives the way that they do, and I need to protect that information as much as I value it.
Right.
Absolutely. Now, since each situation is different, what are some of the numerous trainings and treatment modalities that are utilized for both the caregiver as well as the children?
I think this is another area where NCSS has really stepped up to the plate, at least in my own opinion, because they really are a very pro-training, furthering education agency. And so there are a lot of different ways that as staff members we can go out and continue to educate ourselves, and they're very active in making sure that we do. I'm very supportive of that too. So a lot of the different trainings that we've been to, Becky mentioned one earlier, and some of the trainings that I've been to have been focused around, it's called DDP, or Dyadic Developmental Psychotherapy. So it's a long name, but basically just means that it's working with families where the child in the family has experienced some kind of severed attachment with their parents. Maybe they were adopted, or they got removed from the home for a short time. So there's a kind of an attachment piece to it, and then there's also a traumatic experience that's kind of tied either specifically to that or a separate instance. But it's taking those two worlds of trauma and attachment and kind of combining them into one approach. And a huge component of that type of therapy is to really work with the parents. Like Becky was mentioning, having a child or having a session that's kind of with the whole family, and some that's just with the parents specifically. But in this approach, you have a lot of education where you can just sit down with the parents and just say, okay, here's the things that we're working on just for you, because it's not just about your child, it's also about you. And like she's mentioning how the family system works together, to have that approach with the parent, be able to say, here are some specific ways that's really going to be beneficial for you moving forward with your child. I feel like the parents that I work with, and I take this approach with them, they really look at it as like, this is not something I've heard before. Like, how is it that this has never come out? So it's great to be able to work with somebody that can be really receptive at the same time as just kind of seeing this other side of what they typically, not every parent, I was going to make a broad generalization there, but a lot of parents are kind of at this place when they come, or when we come to them, where they've been really stressed out. They've been working on something for so long, and they're just going through day to day to day, just thinking, okay, I got to get through this, I got to get through this. This is so stressful for me right now. And to be able to come with them after we've gone to all these numerous trainings, and we have these different ideas that are coming from, whether it's DDP or it's coming from a behavioral standpoint, where we're saying, okay, let's do something really concrete because your child needs kind of black and white and schedules and routines. And we can kind of use these different trainings that we're allowed to go to and kind of come at them from a couple of different angles that really is directed by them, ultimately, is like, this is what's going to be effective for me. So So yeah, we do trainings quite frequently, and we have an electronic system where we get kind of updates and when our trainings are kind of coming up. So there's a new training that's coming up, so make sure you go online and go through this. Some of them that are more specific to NCSS, but then the different treatment modalities, some of them are very specific to the types of diagnoses that we get. So a big thing in Franklin County is experiencing with trauma, and trauma can be anything from physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, anything that just kind of encompasses those kind of big areas, and to have trainings that are specific to that are really beneficial. And one of the things is ARC, so attachment and self-regulation and competency, but I know you have some information about that as well. So that kind of is another one of those trainings where it's something that not just in CSS but Vermont as a whole has really just kind of grabbed this approach. But it's another one of those ones where I feel like parents are really receptive to it because it's so different than what you would at least what I would kind of expect. It's not really cookie cutter, and it allows for a lot of flexibility so that the parents and the families that we're working with can really kind of get their own personalized experience through that approach.
Well, and I think like so similarly to what I think you really hit the nail on earlier, which is that none of the work that we do with our families is scripted. It's so individual based. What do they need? And I think the great thing about this ARC treatment modality is that it really focuses on that, and it sets these overarching goals. So it says, so in order to treat children with trauma, and the ARC model is a model of treatment for children with trauma, we have to work with caregivers. And it has all this research and this data that's backing up, that's saying the way that the caregiver attunes to a child, attaches to a child, provides basic needs, provides consistent responses, makes the difference in the child's life. But there is not a scripted model of how you get there. There is an array of things that you can choose from to say, I think this will help us get to this goal with this family, and this will help me get to this goal with that family. And it's really about that kind of work.
Right.
Well, believe it or not, I can't believe our time's up. And I want to thank my special guests, Becky Phillips, Kathy Sandville, Ben Houchin, and Corinne Mertz for being on the show today and sharing their insights on the Intensive Family-Based Services Program at NCSS. I also want to thank you, the viewer, for spending time with us again this month. For more of this interview, including success stories and the state's new integrated family services model that is being piloted in Franklin and Grand Isle counties, log on to ncssinc.org and click on to the link to the NCSS YouTube channel. I'm Joe Halko, and I'll be back next month with another episode of NCSS Here for You. This has been another episode of NCSS Here for You. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and educational. For over 50 years, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to quality psychosocial services to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. Thanks once again for tuning in this month. NCSS's purpose remains creating a stronger community, one person at a time.